He was the king of the underworld, a man who could silence a room just by walking into it. Lorenzo Moretti didn't have a heart. Everyone in the city knew that. He dealt in fear, money, and blood. But on a rainy Tuesday night, in a cheap diner that smelled like grease and despair, the impossible happened. He brought his dying mother in for a meal she refused to eat. The staff was shaking. The manager was sweating. Until a quiet waitress named Katie stepped forward and whispered 6 words in a dialect that hadn't been spoken in his village for 20 years. Those words didn't just save the night. They started a war. And the target was on her back. The neon sign of the Midnight Diner flickered with an irritating buzz, casting a sickly blue light onto the wet pavement of Chicago. Inside, Katie Vance wiped down the counter for the 100th time that shift. Her feet throbbed. The cheap rubber soles of her shoes had worn through weeks ago. But with rent due in 3 days, and her little brother, Toby, needing his asthma medication, new shoes were a luxury she couldn't afford. "Katie, pick up the pace on table 4. The manager, Rick, barked from the kitchen pass. Rick was a man who sweated grease and paid minimum wage with a scowl. "On it, Rick," Katie muttered, brushing a stray lock of chestnut hair behind her ear. She was invisible here. Just a pair of hands, serving coffee and pancakes. That was how she liked it. Invisibility was safety. The bell above the door chimed. It wasn't the usual soft tinkle. The door was thrown open with a force that made the glass rattle. The atmosphere in the diner changed instantly. The low hum of conversation died. The clatter of silverware stopped. Even the fry cook froze. 3 men walked in. The first 2 were built like vending machines, wearing dark trench coats that failed to hide the bulges of shoulder holsters. They scanned the room with cold, dead eyes. But it was the 3rd man who sucked the oxygen out of the room. Lorenzo Moretti. Katie gripped the dish rag tighter. She recognized him. Everyone in the city recognized him. He was on the news, usually followed by words like alleged and indictment. He was tall, with jet black hair slicked back and a jawline sharp enough to cut glass. He wore a suit that cost more than the diner itself. But tonight, the devil looked tired. Holding his arm was an elderly woman. She was frail, wrapped in a black shawl, leaning heavily on a cane. Her face was a map of wrinkles, etched with pain and displeasure. "This way, Mama," Lorenzo said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the floorboards. He guided her to the corner booth, the one with the least rips in the vinyl. Rick, the manager, practically tripped over his own feet, rushing out from the kitchen. Mr. Moretti." "What an honor. Please, sit. Anything you want, on the house." Lorenzo didn't even look at him. He was focused entirely on the old woman. "Just water for now. And a menu. Clean one." Rick scrambled away, his face pale. He shoved a menu into Katie's hands. "You take them. Don't mess this up, Katie. If you spill coffee on that suit, we're all dead." Katie took a deep breath. "Don't look him in the eye. Just do the job." She walked over, pad in hand. "Good evening. Can I get you started with drinks?" The old woman, Mama Rosa, looked at Katie with disdain. She said something sharp and rapid-fire in Italian, waving her hand dismissively at the laminated menu. Lorenzo sighed, rubbing his temples. "Mama, please, just try the soup." "No," Rosa snapped in broken English, pushing the menu away. "Food here is garbage. Cold, American slop." She turned to Lorenzo and unleashed a tirade in Italian. She was complaining about the smell, the lights, and how ungrateful her son was for dragging her to this rat hole. Lorenzo looked helpless. For all his power, for all the fear he instilled in the city, he was terrified of disappointing this 90-pound woman. "Mama, the doctor said you need to eat. "Please, I want pastina," she cried out. "Like home, not this." The bodyguards shifted uncomfortably. Rick was watching from behind the counter, looking like he was about to faint. The tension was thick enough to choke on. If the old lady threw a fit, Lorenzo might take his anger out on the place. Katie stared at the old woman. She knew that tone. She knew that specific dialect. It wasn't standard Italian. It was Sicilian, specifically from the rocky hills of Corleone. A dialect of farmers, survivors, and old secrets. Katie knew she should stay silent. Her rule was simple. Be invisible. But looking at the pain in the old woman's eyes and the desperation in the son's, something in her chest tightened. Without thinking, Katie stepped closer. She lowered her voice, shifting her posture from a tired waitress to something softer, more respectful. "Signora," Katie said, the vowels rolling perfectly off her tongue. "The chef here is terrible, it is true, but if you allow me, I can make you pastina, with the little stars, just like in the old country. Broth, not water." She spoke in perfect Sicilian, the specific dialect of the Moretti village. The silence that followed was deafening. Lorenzo's head snapped up. His eyes, the color of stormy seas, locked onto hers. He looked shocked, then suspicious. Mama Rosa stopped crying. She blinked, looking at Katie as if seeing her for the first time. Her trembling hand reached out. You speak the tongue?" she whispered in Italian. "My grandmother taught me," Katie replied softly in the same dialect. She said soup heals the soul before it heals the body. A slow smile spread across Mama Rosa's face. It was the first time she had smiled in months. Make it for me, child." Lorenzo stared at Katie. The coldness in his eyes had vanished, replaced by an intense, burning curiosity. "Who are you?" he asked in English. "Just the waitress," Katie said, clutching her order pad like a shield. "I'll go tell the cook." She turned and walked away, feeling Lorenzo's gaze burning a hole in her back. She had made a mistake. She had made herself visible. Katie went into the kitchen, pushed the confused fry cook aside, and found the hidden stash of pasta stars she kept for her own lunch. She made the broth herself, seasoning it carefully, ignoring Rick's frantic questions. When she brought the steaming bowl out, the diner was silent. She placed it in front of Mama Rosa. The old woman took a sip, closed her eyes, and sighed. "Good," Rosa whispered. "Good." Lorenzo watched his mother eat with a look of pure relief. He didn't touch his own food. He just watched Katie. Every time she refilled a coffee at another table, his eyes tracked her. It made her skin prickle. When they finally stood to leave, the bodyguards moved to the door. Lorenzo helped his mother up, then turned to Katie. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a money clip. He peeled off a stack of $100 bills, at least $1,000. He placed it on the table. "For the soup," he said. Katie shook her head immediately. "That's too much. The soup is $5, sir." Lorenzo took a step closer. He smelled of expensive cologne and gun smoke. "Nobody tells my mother no, and lives to tell the tale. You made her say yes. That is worth more than money." "I can't take it," Katie insisted. "I just did my job." Lorenzo narrowed his eyes. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper so only she could hear. "You speak the dialect of the Western Hills. You speak it like a native. Yet your name tag says Katie. You look American. But you have the eyes of someone who has seen the old country." "I learned it in school," Katie lied, her heart hammering against her ribs. "They don't teach that dialect in school," Lorenzo countered smoothly. "They teach it in the kitchen, in the family." He placed a business card on top of the cash. It was black with gold embossing. Moretti Enterprises. "If you ever need anything," he said, "and I mean anything, you call this number." He turned and walked out into the rain, his bodyguards flanking him. Katie stared at the card. Her hands were shaking. She shoved the money and the card into her apron pocket just as Rick ran over. "What did he say? Did he threaten you?" Rick demanded. "No," Katie whispered. "He just paid the bill." For the next 2 weeks, things were normal. Or as normal as they could be. Katie used the money to buy Toby's medicine and pay the back rent. She thought she was in the clear. She thought Lorenzo Moretti was a one-time event. She was wrong. On a Friday night, the diner was packed. Katie was carrying a tray of burgers when the door opened. It was him. Lorenzo. Alone this time. He didn't sit in a booth. He sat at the counter, right in front of her station. He was wearing a casual leather jacket that made him look younger, dangerous in a different way. "Coffee," he said when she approached. "Black." Katie poured it, her hand trembling slightly. "Where is your mother?" "Resting." "She asked about you," Lorenzo said, taking a sip. "She calls you the girl with the golden voice. She wants you to come to dinner." Katie froze. "Mr. Moretti, Lorenzo," he corrected. "And it wasn't a request. My mother is difficult. She has fired 3 nurses this week because they don't understand her. She wants you." "I'm a waitress, not a nurse," Katie said, trying to keep her voice steady. "And I can't just leave." "I'll pay you triple what you make here," Lorenzo said calmly. "Just to sit with her, talk to her in the dialect, read to her." "I can't," Katie said, a little too sharply. Lorenzo put the cup down. The cafe went quiet around them again. "Why are you afraid of me, Katie?" "I'm not," she lied. "You are," he said softly. "You look at me like you know who I am, like you know what I do." He leaned over the counter. "But you also look at me like you're hiding something, and I'm very good at finding hidden things." Suddenly, the front door of the diner burst open again, but this time it wasn't customers. 4 men walked in. They weren't wearing suits. They were wearing leather vests with a patch on the back. The Vipers. A biker gang. Low-level thugs but violent. They were drunk, loud, and looking for trouble. They knocked over a chair and shoved a customer aside. Rick, the manager, cowered behind the register. The leader of the bikers, a giant man with a scarred face, slammed his hand on the counter next to Lorenzo, ignoring him completely. He looked at Katie. "Hey, sweetheart," the biker grunted, his breath smelling of cheap beer. "You look pretty. Why don't you come out back with us? We need some service." Katie backed away. "Please leave." "Don't be shy," the biker sneered, reaching over the counter to grab her wrist. Katie gasped, pulling back, but his grip was like iron. "Let go of her," a voice said. It was calm, almost bored. The biker turned to look at the man sitting next to him. He looked at Lorenzo's expensive haircut, the lack of tattoos visible. He laughed. "Or what, pretty boy? You gonna call the cops?" Lorenzo didn't stand up. He didn't even look at the biker. He just swirled his coffee. "I don't call cops," Lorenzo said. "Let her go." The biker laughed and pulled a knife from his belt, jamming it into the counter inches from Lorenzo's hand. "Walk away, rich boy, before I cut that pretty face." Lorenzo finally looked at him, and in that moment, the entire diner felt the temperature drop 20 degrees. "You just made the last mistake of your life," Lorenzo whispered. The violence happened so fast that Katie barely registered it. One moment, the biker was sneering. The next, Lorenzo had moved with the speed of a striking cobra. He grabbed the biker's wrist, the one holding the knife, and twisted it with a sickening crack. The biker screamed, dropping the knife. Before the sound even left his throat, Lorenzo had slammed the man's face into the countertop. Thud. The other 3 bikers roared and charged. Katie screamed, "Look out!" Lorenzo stood up, spinning on his heel. He wasn't brawling, he was dismantling them. He dodged a heavy punch, landed 2 precision strikes to a biker's ribs, and sent him crashing into a table. The 3rd man swung a chain. Lorenzo caught it, yanked the man forward, and delivered a knee to the gut that folded him in half. It took less than 20 seconds. 4 bikers lay groaning on the floor. Lorenzo stood in the middle of the chaos, barely breathing hard. He adjusted his leather jacket, then picked up his napkin and wiped a speck of blood off his knuckles. He looked at Katie. Her eyes were wide, her chest heaving. She was terrified, but not of the bikers. She was terrified of him. "I hate interruptions," Lorenzo muttered. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a wad of cash, and threw it at the trembling manager, Rick, for the damages, and for the inconvenience. He turned back to Katie. "As I was saying, my mother expects you for dinner tomorrow. My driver will pick you up at 7. Katie stammered. "You just broke their bones." "They touched you," Lorenzo said simply. The intensity in his voice took her breath away. "Nobody touches what is mine." Katie's heart stopped. "What is mine?" "I'm not yours," she whispered. Lorenzo stepped closer, leaning over the counter until his face was inches from hers. "Not yet. But you have a secret, Katie. I saw it in your eyes when I fought them. You didn't flinch at the violence. You assessed it. You watched my technique." He smiled, a dangerous, wolfish grin. "You aren't just a waitress, and I'm going to find out exactly who you are. 7 p.m., don't be late." He turned and walked out into the night, stepping over the moaning biker on the floor. Katie watched him go, her legs giving out. She sank to the floor behind the counter. She pulled her phone out of her pocket with shaking hands. She dialed a number she hadn't called in 3 years. "Hello?" A distorted voice answered on the other end. "Uncle Tony," Katie whispered, tears stinging her eyes. "I have a problem. Lorenzo Moretti found me." "Did he recognize you?" The voice hissed urgently. "No," Katie said. "Not yet. But he's looking. And he likes me." "Listen to me carefully, Sophia," the voice said, using her real name. "You have to run. If Moretti finds out you are the daughter of the man who betrayed his father, he won't date you. He will kill you." "I can't run," Katie sobbed. "Toby is sick. He's in the hospital program here. If we leave, he loses the treatment. He'll die." "Then you have to play the game," Uncle Tony said darkly. "Get close to him. Make him trust you. Make him fall in love with you. It is the only shield you have. Because if his rival, Marco Vetti, finds out you're in town before Lorenzo does, you're dead anyway." Katie hung up the phone. She looked at the business card Lorenzo had left the first night. Moretti Enterprises. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was a spy in the house of the devil. And the scariest part wasn't that he might kill her. The scariest part was the way her heart had raced when he said, "Nobody touches what is mine." The car that picked Katie up was not a taxi. It was a Rolls-Royce Phantom, black as midnight, with tinted windows that turned the world outside into a grey blur. The driver, a man with a neck as thick as a tree trunk named Dante, didn't say a word. He just opened the door and waited. Katie sat in the back, her hands clasped tightly in her lap to stop them from shaking. She was wearing a simple navy dress she had bought from a thrift store that morning, modest, respectful. She had pinned her hair back, trying to look like Katie the waitress, not Sophia, daughter of the traitor. Every mile they drove away from the city, and toward the wealthy estates of Lake Forest. The knot in her stomach tightened. She was driving into the heart of the beast. The Moretti estate was a fortress. Iron gates, 12 feet high, swung open slowly. Cameras tracked the vehicle's every move. As the car pulled up the winding driveway, Katie saw armed guards patrolling the perimeter with German shepherds. This wasn't a home, it was a compound. Dante opened the door. "Mr. Moretti is in the library. He said to bring you there first." Katie nodded, her throat too dry to speak. She followed Dante through the massive oak double doors. The house smelled of lemon polish, old wood, and money. It was silent, cavernous, and intimidating. They reached a set of mahogany doors. Dante knocked once, then pushed them open. The library was 2 stories high, filled with books that looked like they hadn't been touched in a century. A fire crackled in a massive stone hearth. Standing by the fireplace, swirling a glass of amber liquid, was Lorenzo. He looked different than he did in the diner. He wasn't wearing a suit jacket, just a white dress shirt with the top buttons undone and the sleeves rolled up, revealing tanned forearms marked with faint, jagged scars. He looked less like a king and more like a warrior at rest. "You came," Lorenzo said, turning to face her. The firelight danced in his eyes. "I didn't think I had a choice," Katie replied, her voice echoing slightly in the large room. Lorenzo smirked, walking toward her. "There's always a choice, Katie. But I'm glad you made the right one." He stopped 2 feet away from her. The air between them crackled with static electricity. "My mother is upstairs getting ready. She is excited. She hasn't been excited about anything since my father died." "I'm just here to help," Katie said, avoiding his gaze. She looked at the bookshelves. "You have a lot of history here." "We keep our history close," Lorenzo said, his voice dropping an octave, "so we don't repeat the mistakes of the past." Katie froze. Was that a test? Lorenzo took another step. He was close enough now that she could smell the whiskey and sandalwood on him. He reached out, his fingers brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. His touch was incredibly gentle, at odds with the violence she had seen him inflict the night before. "You are trembling," he whispered. "I'm intimidated," she admitted. That part wasn't a lie. "Good," Lorenzo said, his eyes searching hers. "Fear keeps you sharp. But you don't need to fear me tonight. Tonight you are a guest, a friend of the family." He offered her his arm. "Shall we? Mama Rosa is waiting." Dinner was served in a dining room that could seat 30 people, but the table was set for only 3. Mama Rosa sat at the head, looking frail but alert. When she saw Katie, her face lit up. "Katie, come sit next to me," Rosa cried out in the Sicilian dialect. Katie smiled, the language acting as a bridge, allowing her to slip into the persona she needed. "Good evening, Signora. You look beautiful tonight." For the next 2 hours, Katie performed the greatest acting role of her life. She spoke with Rosa about the hills of Corleone, about recipes for arancini, about the old saints and the festivals. She made up stories about a grandmother she never had, weaving details from her actual childhood, details she had learned from her own father before he turned traitor, into a tapestry of lies. Lorenzo sat opposite them, eating silently. He watched Katie with the intensity of a predator studying prey. He listened to every vowel, every inflection. "You know," Lorenzo said suddenly, switching to English, cutting through the warm atmosphere. "It is strange." Katie looked up, her fork halfway to her mouth. "What is?" "My father had a lieutenant," Lorenzo said, swirling his wine. "A man named Carlo. He was from the same village as my mother. He spoke the dialect just like you do, with that specific lilt on the R's. Katie's heart hammered against her ribs. Carlo. That was her father. It's a common dialect in that region, Katie said, keeping her voice steady, though her palms were sweating. Is it? Lorenzo leaned forward. Carlo betrayed us. He stole $5 million and sold our roots to the Russians. He disappeared 10 years ago. They say he had a family, a daughter. The room went deadly silent. Even Mama Rosa stopped eating, sensing the shift in the air. Katie forced herself to look Lorenzo in the eye. This was the moment. If she flinched, she was dead. I don't know who Carlo is, Katie said coldly. My father was a baker in Ohio. He died of a heart attack when I was 12. I learned the language from my nonna, who never left her kitchen. If you are accusing me of something, Mr. Moretti, say it. Otherwise, let me eat my risotto. Lorenzo stared at her. The seconds stretched out like hours. He was looking for a tick, a blink, a sign of deception. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his face. It wasn't a scary smile. It was impressed. A baker, Lorenzo chuckled. I like bread. My apologies, Katie. Paranoia is an occupational hazard. He raised his glass. To the baker. Katie raised her glass, her hand steady only by sheer force of will. To the baker. She had survived the first test, but as she drank the wine, she knew it was only the beginning. Lorenzo wasn't convinced. He was just intrigued. After dinner, Mama Rosa grabbed Katie's hand. You will come back? Tomorrow? Katie looked at Lorenzo. He was leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching her. I work at the diner, Signora, Katie said. I bought the diner, Lorenzo said, casually. Katie whipped her head around. You what? I bought the building this morning, Lorenzo said, checking his expensive watch. Rick is now my employee. And so are you. Your shift at the diner is cancelled. Your new shift is here. Every evening. Triple pay. Benefits. And I'll cover whatever medical expenses your family might have. Katie felt the trap snap shut. He had done a background check. He knew about Toby's illness. He just didn't know who she really was. Yet. You researched me, she said. I protect what matters to me, Lorenzo replied. My mother matters. You make her happy. So, you matter. He walked her to the car. Before she got in, he held the door. Katie, he said softly. Yes? Don't lie to me again, he whispered, his voice dropping to that dangerous rumble. I can forgive a lot of things, but I don't forgive lies. He closed the door, leaving her in the dark, terrified and exhilaratingly alive. 3 weeks passed. Katie, now living a fractured double life, had become a fixture at the Moretti estate. Every evening she went to the mansion. She read to Mama Rosa, helped her with her physical therapy, and slowly, agonizingly, she got closer to Lorenzo. She saw the man behind the monster. She saw him playing chess with his nephew. She saw him exhausted after long meetings, rubbing his eyes with a vulnerability the world never saw, and she saw the way he looked at her, like she was the only source of light in a very dark room. It was becoming harder to report back to Uncle Tony. Does he trust you yet? Uncle Tony asked during one of their burner phone calls. Katie was hiding in the bathroom of her small apartment, the shower running to mask her voice. I think so, Katie whispered. He leaves files on his desk when I'm around. He talks about shipments. Good, Tony hissed. We need the date of the next shipment from the port. The Russians are pressing us. If we give them that, they'll pay enough to get you and Toby to Switzerland. New identities. Surgery for the boy. Real freedom, Sophia. I'll get it, Katie said. But as she hung up, she felt a wave of nausea. She was betraying the man who was paying for her brother's current treatment, the man who had started looking at her not just with desire, but with something terrifyingly close to affection. The next night was the turning point, the annual Children's Hospital Gala. It was the biggest social event in Chicago. The Mafia didn't officially attend, but legitimate businessmen, like Lorenzo Moretti, were the guests of honor. When Katie arrived at the estate that afternoon, she found a box on the bed in the guest room she used. Inside was a dress. It was red, deep, blood-red silk, backless, with a slit that went up to her thigh. It was elegant, screaming of danger and passion. There was a note. "Wear this. You are my +1. Katie put it on. It fit like a second skin. She looked in the mirror and didn't recognize herself. She looked like a queen of the underworld. When she walked down the grand staircase, Lorenzo was waiting at the bottom. He was wearing a tuxedo, his hair perfectly styled. When he looked up and saw her, he stopped breathing. He actually stopped. He didn't say a word as she descended. He just took her hand and kissed the knuckles, his eyes burning into hers. "Perfection," he murmured. The gala was held in a massive ballroom in downtown Chicago. Chandeliers sparkled, champagne flowed, and a live orchestra played waltzes. But beneath the glamour, the room was filled with sharks. Katie spotted rival gang leaders, corrupt politicians, and crooked cops. Lorenzo kept a hand on the small of her back the entire night. It was possessive, protective. "Stay close to me," he told her. "There are wolves here." "I thought you were the wolf," she teased, the champagne making her bold. "I am," Lorenzo smiled, "but tonight I'm just a man on a date." They danced. Lorenzo moved with surprising grace for a man so large. Being in his arms felt intoxicating. For a moment, Katie forgot about the mission. She forgot about Uncle Tony. She forgot about her dead father. She just wanted to be Katie, and she wanted him to be Lorenzo. "You know," Lorenzo whispered in her ear as they swayed to the music. "I haven't brought a woman to this event in 5 years." "Why me?" Katie asked, looking up at him. "Because you are the only person who doesn't look at me and see a wallet or a gun," he said softly. "You see me." Katie felt a pang of guilt so sharp it nearly brought her to her knees. "If you knew who I was, you'd kill me right here on the dance floor." "Lorenzo," she started. "I need to tell you." "Lorenzo, che piacere." A loud, booming voice interrupted them. Lorenzo stiffened. His hand on her back turned from a caress to a hard grip. The warmth vanished from his eyes, replaced by glacial ice. He turned them around. Standing there was a man in a white tuxedo. He was handsome in a greasy, reptilian way. He had a smile that didn't reach his dead, black eyes. Marco Vetti, the rival Don, the man who wanted to take over the city, and the man who had killed Katie's father after he had outlived his usefulness. "Marco," Lorenzo nodded, his voice flat. "I didn't know they allowed snakes in the ballroom." Marco laughed, a dry, hacking sound. "Always the joker, Lorenzo. And who is this exquisite creature?" Marco's eyes raked over Katie. He stepped closer, invading her personal space. Katie stopped breathing. Marco had known her father. He had come to their house when she was a child. Would he recognize her? It had been 10 years. She had changed. She was a woman now, not a scrawny 12-year-old. "This is Katie," Lorenzo said, stepping slightly in front of her. "She is with me." "Katie," Marco tested the name, tasting it. He looked into her eyes. He stared. Katie held his gaze. "Don't blink. Don't look away." Marco's smile widened. It became predatory. "Katie," Marco repeated, "you have very familiar eyes. Beautiful, sad eyes. I knew a man with eyes like that once. A baker. Or was he a rat? I forget." Lorenzo's jaw clenched. "Walk away, Marco. Before I make a scene." Calm down, amico. Marco raised his hands in mock surrender. I just want a dance. One dance with the belle of the ball. Is that too much to ask? Unless you are afraid she might prefer my company. Lorenzo looked ready to snap Marco's neck, but causing a scene here in front of the mayor and the police commissioner was bad business. It's up to the lady, Lorenzo growled. Katie knew she had to defuse the situation. If Lorenzo attacked him, it would start a war tonight. One dance, Katie said, her voice cool. Then you leave us alone. Lorenzo looked at her, concerned, but he nodded, releasing her. Marco took her hand. His skin was cold and clammy. He pulled her onto the dance floor, away from Lorenzo. As the music swelled, Marco pulled her uncomfortably close. Hello, Sophia, Marco whispered in her ear. Katie's blood turned to ice. She missed a step. Careful, Marco chuckled, holding her up. Don't want to trip. It's a long way down. I don't know what you're talking about, Katie hissed. Oh, please, Marco sneered. I never forget a face, especially the face of Carlo's little girl. You look just like your mother. How is she? Oh, wait. She died of grief after we gutted your father like a fish. What do you want? Katie whispered, fighting the urge to vomit. I want what you want, Marco said, spinning her around. I want Lorenzo Moretti destroyed. I know why you're here, Sophia. You're here for revenge, aren't you? Or maybe you're working for that idiot Uncle Tony? I'm not working for anyone, she lied. It doesn't matter, Marco said. Here is the deal. You are inside the house. You have his trust. I want the location of the safe house where he keeps the ledger. The real ledger. All his accounts. I don't know where it is, Katie said. Find it, Marco hissed. You have 48 hours. Bring me the location, or I go to Lorenzo. I tell him his sweet little Katie is actually Sophia Rossi, daughter of the rat Carlo, and I tell him you've been spying on him for weeks. He pulled back to look at her face, enjoying her terror. He loves you, doesn't he? I saw it in his eyes, Marco mocked. Imagine how much he'll hate you when he finds out the truth. He won't just kill you, Sophia. He'll kill your brother too. I know about the boy. Toby, right? Asthma. Katie felt a murderous rage bubble up inside her. If you touch him, then get me the ledger, Marco snapped. Friday night, midnight, behind the old shipyard. Bring the location, or I send Lorenzo a picture of you and your daddy. The music ended. Marco bowed theatrically. Thank you for the dance, Katie, he said, loud enough for Lorenzo to hear as he approached. Marco walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Lorenzo was at her side instantly. What did he say to you? You're pale. Katie looked at Lorenzo. He looked concerned, protective. He was ready to burn the world down for her, and she had to betray him to save her brother. He threatened to hurt your business, Katie lied, her voice trembling. Lorenzo wrapped his arm around her, pulling her tight against his chest. He can't touch us. As long as you are with me, you are untouchable. I promise you. Katie buried her face in his jacket, smelling his scent. Tears leaked from her eyes, soaking into his expensive tuxedo. I know, she whispered. But she knew he was wrong. She wasn't untouchable. She was a ticking time bomb, and the timer had just started counting down. The drive back from the gala was suffocatingly quiet. Lorenzo held Katie's hand the entire way, his thumb tracing soothing circles on her palm, unaware that her heart was beating out a rhythm of pure panic. 48 hours. Find the ledger. Or Toby dies. When they arrived at the estate, the house was dark. The staff had retired. Stay with me tonight, Lorenzo said, standing at the door to her guest room. He didn't mean it explicitly. He meant he didn't want to be alone. The encounter with Marco had rattled him more than he showed. I can't, Kati stammered. I have a headache. The champagne. Lorenzo nodded, looking disappointed, but respectful. He kissed her forehead. Rest, Katie. I have work to do in the study anyway. I'll see you in the morning. He walked away down the hall. Katie watched him go, a tear slipping down her cheek. She waited 10 minutes, then 20. Then she took off her heels, barefoot in the expensive red dress, and crept into the hallway. She knew where the study was. She knew Lorenzo kept the real work hidden behind a painting of the Roman Colosseum. She had seen him glancing at it. She reached the study door. It was cracked open slightly. She peeked inside. Lorenzo was slumped in his leather chair, a glass of whiskey in his hand, staring at the fire. He looked burdened, heavy with the weight of his empire. After a moment, he finished the drink, stood up, and left the room through the side door that led to his private quarters. This was her chance. Katie slipped inside. She moved to the painting and felt behind the frame. A latch clicked. The painting swung forward, revealing a heavy steel safe. The combination. Marco had said it was her father's birthday. It was a test to see if Lorenzo was sentimental, or maybe it was something else. She tried Lorenzo's birthday. Error. She tried Mama Rosa's birthday. Error. Her hands were sweating. One more try before the alarm triggered. She thought about what Lorenzo had said earlier. I protect what matters. She typed in the date of the day they met at the diner. The day she made the soup. Click. The green light flashed. Katie's heart stopped. He had changed his safe combination to the day he met her. The guilt crashed into her like a wave, almost drowning her. He loves me, and I am about to destroy him. She pulled the heavy door open. Inside were stacks of cash, passports, and a thick, leather-bound book. The ledger. She grabbed it. Her hands shook as she opened it. She needed to verify it was the right one before she took it to Marco. She flipped through the pages. It was a detailed list of every bribe, every shipment, every illicit deal for the last 20 years. It was enough to put Lorenzo away for life. It was enough to get him executed by his rivals. She turned to the older entries, looking for her father's name. Carlo Rossi. She found it. The entry was dated 10 years ago, but it didn't say traitor. It didn't say stolen funds. The entry read, Carlo Rossi. Payment, 5 million purpose. Life insurance for his daughter, Sophia. Status, hero. Sacrificed himself to Marco Vetti to save the Moretti shipment. Cover story. Labeled traitor to protect family from Vetti's retaliation. Katie gasped, covering her mouth to stifle a scream. The book fell from her hands onto the carpet. Her father wasn't a rat. He was a hero. He hadn't stolen the money. Lorenzo's father had given it to him to hide away for her. And Marco Vetti, the man currently blackmailing her, was the one who had killed him. Marco had lied to her. Uncle Tony had lied to her. They had used her grief to turn her into a weapon against the very people who had tried to protect her father. I see you found the reading material. The voice came from the doorway. Deep, calm, terrifying. Katie spun around. Lorenzo was standing there. He wasn't surprised. He wasn't angry. He was leaning against the doorframe, holding a gun. But the gun wasn't pointed at her. It was pointing at the floor. Lorenzo, she choked out. I can explain. You don't need to, Lorenzo said, walking into the room. He holstered the gun. I knew who you were the moment you made the soup, Sophia. Nobody makes pastina like Carlo's mother did. He taught you well. You knew? Katie whispered. And you let me stay? I promised your father I would look after you, Lorenzo said, stopping in front of her. I lost track of you when you changed your name and moved. When you walked into my life, I couldn't believe it. I wanted to tell you the truth, but I saw the fear in your eyes. I knew someone had poisoned you against me." He looked down at the ledger on the floor. "Marco?" "Yes," she wept. "He has Toby. He said he'd kill him if I didn't bring him the book." Lorenzo's expression darkened. The temperature in the room plummeted. The sadness vanished, replaced by the cold, lethal rage of the Godfather. "He threatened the boy?" Lorenzo asked softly. "Yes." Lorenzo picked up the ledger. He dusted it off and handed it to her. "Then take it to him," Lorenzo said. Katie stared at him. "What? This destroys you." "Take it to him," Lorenzo repeated. "Meet him exactly where he said. Give him what he wants." He reached out and cupped her face, wiping away a tear with his thumb. "But wear a coat," he whispered. "It's going to be a cold night at the shipyard." The shipyard was a graveyard of rusted metal and forgotten ghosts. A thick, freezing fog rolled off Lake Michigan, swallowing the rows of shipping containers in a milky haze. The only sound was the distant groan of a crane settling in the wind and the frantic rhythm of Katie's own heart. She stood under the buzzing halo of a single halogen street lamp. The light turned her red dress into a beacon of blood against the grey night. She clutched the heavy leather ledger to her chest so tightly her knuckles were white. "Trust him," she told herself, though every instinct screamed at her to run. Lorenzo said to trust him. A heavy metal door screeched open in the distance. Footsteps echoed on the wet pavement. Not one pair, but three. Emerging from the fog like a nightmare was Marco Vetti. He wore a cashmere coat that cost more than Katie's childhood home, but it couldn't hide the rot in his soul. Flanking him were two guards, their hands resting ominously inside their jackets. Marco stopped 10 feet away. He looked at Katie, then at the book in her arms, and a slow, reptilian smile spread across his face. "Right on time, sweetheart," Marco purred, his voice slick with triumph. "I knew you were smart. Smarter than your father, anyway." Katie forced her spine to straighten. "Where is my brother?" she demanded, her voice cutting through the wind. "You said you'd bring him." "The boy is fine." Marco waved a dismissive hand. "He's in a van just outside the gate. You give me the book, I make a call, and he goes home. Simple economics." He took a step closer, extending a gloved hand. "Now, give it to me. I've waited 10 years to see the inside of that book." Katie didn't move. She stared into Marco's dead, black eyes. "You killed him," she whispered. "My father. You told me he was a traitor, but you killed him because he wouldn't betray the Morettis." Marco laughed, a dry, hacking sound that grated on her nerves. "Does it matter? History is written by the winners, Sophia. And tonight, I win. Your father was a fool. He chose loyalty over survival. Don't make the same mistake. Hand over the ledger, or your little brother stops breathing in 5 minutes." The threat hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Katie took a deep breath. She thought of Lorenzo's eyes in the library. "Take it to him." She stepped forward and shoved the heavy book into Marco's chest. "Take it!" she spat. "And go to hell." Marco grabbed the ledger with greedy hands. He practically drooled as he unlatched the cover. He flipped through the pages, his eyes darting across the rows of numbers, names, and accounts. "Yes," Marco hissed, his face lit by the halogen lamp. "The judges, the union leaders, the offshore accounts, it's all here. With this, I don't just destroy Lorenzo. I become the king of Chicago." He looked up at Katie, his eyes gleaming with malice. "You did good, girl. You really did." Marco closed the book with a snap. He looked at his guards. "Clean up the loose ends." Katie's blood ran cold. "We had a deal." "Deals change," Marco sneered. "You know too much, and frankly, you look too much like your father. I don't like looking at ghosts." He nodded to the guard on his right. "Shoot her." The guard pulled a suppressed pistol from his jacket and raised it. Katie squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for the end. "Lorenzo, you promised." "I wouldn't do that if I were you." A voice boomed from the darkness. It wasn't a shout, it was a command, deep, resonant, and terrifyingly calm. Marco spun around. The guards froze. From the top of the shipping containers surrounding them, floodlights suddenly snapped on, blindingly bright. The fog was instantly pierced by a dozen beams of light. Marco squinted, shielding his eyes. "Who is there?" "The man you tried to bury," the voice replied. Lorenzo Moretti stepped out from behind a rusted pillar. He walked into the circle of light with the casual confidence of a predator entering a pen of sheep. He wasn't wearing a coat. He was in his tuxedo from the gala, the bow tie undone, looking like the personification of vengeance. "Lorenzo," Marco stammered, clutching the ledger to his chest like a shield. How are you here?" "You threatened my family, Marco," Lorenzo said, stopping beside Katie. He didn't look at Marco. He looked at Katie, checking her for injuries. His presence was a physical weight, shielding her from the cold. "Did you really think I wouldn't notice a rat in my city?" "I have the book," Marco screamed, holding it up. "It doesn't matter if you kill me. I have the evidence. My men have copies. If I don't check in within 10 minutes, this goes to the FBI. You're finished." Lorenzo finally looked at Marco. He tilted his head, looking bored. "Open the book to the last page, Marco." "What?" Marco blinked, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cold. "The last page," Lorenzo repeated softly. "Read the inscription." Marco's hands trembled. He opened the ledger again. He flipped past the accounts, past the bribes, to the very back inside cover. There was no writing. Instead, embedded into the hollowed-out leather of the back cover, was a small black device with a blinking red light. Marco's eyes widened in horror. "A bomb?" "A GPS tracker," Lorenzo corrected. "And a microphone. You just confessed to the murder of Carlo Rossi and the kidnapping of a minor while holding a book that contains federal evidence of your own drug trafficking rings." Marco looked confused. "My drug rings? This is your ledger." "No," Lorenzo smiled, a wolfish grin that showed too many teeth. "That is a decoy I made 3 years ago for idiots like you. The real numbers are in my head." "That book? It lists your shipment schedules. I swapped the pages before Katie brought it to you." Marco stared at the pages. He realized, with dawning horror, that the handwriting wasn't Lorenzo's. It was his own lieutenant's, forged perfectly. "You," Marco choked. "You set me up." "I checkmated you," Lorenzo said. Sirens began to wail in the distance, getting louder by the second. Blue and red lights began to flash against the shipyard walls. "The police are already at your warehouse, Marco," Lorenzo said calmly, "and they are pulling up to the gate right now. You are holding the evidence of your own demise." Marco let out a primal scream of rage. He threw the book at Lorenzo and reached for his gun. "Kill them! Kill them both!" Marco shrieked at his guards. But the guards didn't move. They had red laser dots dancing on their foreheads. From the shadows atop the containers, Lorenzo's snipers revealed themselves. "Drop it," Lorenzo commanded. The guards dropped their guns instantly, raising their hands. They knew when the war was lost. Marco stood alone, panting, destroyed. Lorenzo walked over to him. He didn't hit him. He didn't shoot him. He simply leaned in close, his voice a low rumble that only Marco and Katie could hear. "My father respected you once," Lorenzo whispered. But you forgot the first rule of our world. You don't touch the women, and you never touch the children. Lorenzo turned his back on him. He's all yours, officers, he shouted toward the approaching sirens. Marco fell to his knees in the mud, defeated as a SWAT team swarmed the area. Katie didn't watch the arrest. She only had eyes for the man standing in front of her. The adrenaline was fading, leaving her legs shaking so hard she could barely stand. Lorenzo was there instantly. He caught her by the waist, pulling her flush against his hard chest. His heat soaked into her freezing body. "Toby," she gasped, grabbing the lapels of his tuxedo. "Safe," Lorenzo promised, his hands coming up to cup her face, his thumbs wiping away the tears she hadn't realized she was crying. "My driver picked him up before you even left the house. He is at the estate, probably beating Mama Rosa at cards right now. He is untouched, Sophia. I swear it on my life." Katie let out a sob, a sound of pure, unadulterated relief. She buried her face in his neck, inhaling the scent of sandalwood and rain. "You knew," she muffled into his shoulder. "You knew I was lying to you for weeks, and you still gave me the book. You still came for me." Lorenzo pulled back slightly so he could look into her eyes. His expression was open, vulnerable in a way the world never saw. "I didn't trust Sophia the spy," he murmured, his thumb tracing her lower lip. "But I trusted Katie the waitress. I trusted the woman who defended my mother when no one else would. I trusted the woman who looked at me and didn't see a monster." "I almost betrayed you," Katie whispered, shame coloring her voice. "Almost," Lorenzo corrected firmly. "But you didn't. You confessed. You chose to trust me instead of him. That is all that matters." He leaned his forehead against hers. "In my world, loyalty is rare. But love is impossible. You did the impossible, Katie. You stole my heart, and a Sicilian man does not give his heart lightly. And a Rossi woman doesn't give hers lightly either." Katie smiled through her tears. "So you better take good care of it, boss." Lorenzo chuckled, a deep, genuine sound that rumbled through his chest. "I intend to. Starting now." He kissed her then. It wasn't a polite kiss. It was fierce, possessive, and consuming. It tasted of danger and victory. It was a promise that no matter how dark the world got, they would burn it down together. Behind them, the police led a handcuffed Marco away. The nightmare was over. Lorenzo broke the kiss but kept her close. He took off his tuxedo jacket and draped it over her shoulders, wrapping her in his warmth. "Come," he said, guiding her toward the waiting limousine that had pulled up through the fog. "Let's go home. Mama is waiting, and I believe you owe me a bowl of that soup." Katie laughed, leaning her head on his shoulder as they walked away from the wreckage of her past and into their future. "Pastina," she corrected him. "Whatever you call it," Lorenzo grinned, opening the car door for her. "It's my favorite." And that is how the waitress defeated the mob boss, by stealing his heart and saving his soul. I hope you guys enjoyed this roller coaster of a story. It proves that sometimes the strongest weapon isn't a gun, it's the truth. And maybe a good bowl of soup. If you loved the twist about Katie's father, hit the like button now. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications, because next week we are dropping a story about a hidden billionaire who gets rejected by his crush on prom night, only to return 10 years later as her boss. You do not want to miss it. Thanks for watching.